Hello and welcome. In this tutorial, we're going to explore advanced fake 3D techniques, as requested by the majority of you. Instead of breaking down the methods with this scene, I've used an interior scene from an earlier fake 3D tutorial as a starting point. At the end of the video, we will take a look at how to transfer the techniques to the airship scene. So, this video is basically part 1. Go ahead and check it out if you haven't already. At the end of part 1, you should have a scene looking something like this. Now, simply download the Procreate Dreams file provided in the description and you are ready to follow along. You can also just skip part 1. The Dreams file is set up so that you can start with part 2 right away. Let's get right into it. To better understand what we are doing, I made a top-down view of our scene. We have an interior and an exterior, and the camera is supposed to smoothly transition between the two. Only there is no camera in Procreate Dreams, so instead we actually move the scene objects, while the imaginary camera remains stationary. For the sake of this tutorial, I color-coded everything. Open the Dreams file and follow along as we click through the layers. We have a foreground element, a group containing the 3 layers of an air conditioner, some structural detail, the outside wall, the scaffolding, a midground, and a background layer. Everything is named accordingly and highlighted to keep things tidy. Notice that all scene objects are organized into a logical layer structure. These layers separate and group objects based on their position in an imaginary 3D space. After getting an overview, we go ahead and hide all layers except for the outside wall of the exterior and the left wall of the interior. Now that we can see what we're working with, keyframe the initial position of the outside wall at 0 seconds. Then, move to the end of the timeline and scale the outside wall to match the left interior wall. Now, just copy the outside wall layer track and paste it above the interior left wall. We adjust for the slight offset on the duplicate and match it up with the original. After hiding the old interior left wall, we set both wall textures' easing paths to ease in and out, and rename the new one to left. At around the 4.5 seconds mark, the wall textures should now look like this. Take the interior left wall and cut it from 0 to 4.5 seconds, while also cutting the exterior wall from 4.5 seconds until the end. With this neat little trick, we can apply changes only to the inside, without affecting the outside, and vice versa. So, just go ahead and fill in the gap and erase the railing on the inside version. Onto the ceiling. Instead of keyframing the initial position at 0 seconds, we keyframe its position and distortion value at the end, and erase overlapping parts on the left side. By now, keyframing the position and distortion value at 0 seconds, we can adjust the ceiling and match it up to our perspective. This is a process of trial and error, so just play around with it for a little while. When you are happy with the results, we move on to the right side. Once again, make sure that the end position is keyframed and set another keyframe at 0 seconds, adjusting the interior right wall to our outside perspective. When your results look weird, check if all easing paths are set to ease in and out. Once more, a few tweaks here and there, and we should be ready for the next step. The characters. We grab the one on the left first, and the same procedure. Keyframe at the end, keyframe at the start with position adjustments. While doing so, I noticed we have to compensate for the blank space on the right by grabbing our All group and moving all scene objects to fill the gap at the end of the timeline. We can also move everything a little more to the right at the beginning of our animation. Just like we did with the first character, we'll now adjust the other two. For the foreground element, we match the rotation value to our perspective at the start and adjust rotation and position at the end. This element will help conceal ugly seams while transitioning between the two scenes. The green countertop is pretty similar to the ceiling. The end position is keyframed at 10 seconds. Then position and distortion are matched to the perspective at the beginning. This leads to the counter overlapping the character on the left, so we copy the character and move the duplicate to sit on top of the counter. For the scaffolding, we once again keyframe the initial position and move it in place at the end of the animation. As you can see, the scaffolding is now overlapping the character on the left, so we move him up once more. To get rid of the overlap with the ceiling, we copy the ceiling and use it as layer mask for the scaffolding. Be careful to also invert the mask. The next step is the back wall. First keyframe at the end, erasing overlaps, keyframe at the start, and position tweaking. For the structural detail, again initial position keyframing, and because the keyframe at the end wasn't really working out, I instead keyframed it just before it is hidden behind the foreground elements and cropped the track to disappear after entering the inside view. Now it's time for the midground and background elements. First, we move our all group even more to the right. Then we grab the background and keyframe it to move from left to right. Which seems counterintuitive first, but I recorded this shitty video to show you what is actually happening. While the camera is moving closer to the wall on the right, the background close to the wall is disappearing behind it. To fake this effect in 2D, we just move the background to the right. The last thing we have to animate is the air conditioner, which is quite annoying to do for such a little detail, but I think it really helps to sell the 3D effect because it adds a lot of depth to our otherwise rather flat outside wall. We start with the side first and go about business as usual, first keyframing the initial position and distortion, then adjusting it to the end perspective. I also turned off the foreground elements to actually see what I am doing. For the red downside, instead of keyframing the end position, I keyframe it right after it is going to be hidden by the foreground elements. It is very important to set its easing curve to ease in. Otherwise, it won't match up with the rest. Same process for the backside. Finally, we crop them to be invisible in the interior. At the end, your result should look something like this. And with a lot more painting, details and effects, it will look like this. Now let's go back to the airship scene and try to transfer what we learned. Just like before, we have an interior scene with the imaginary camera sitting inside a transportation box, and we then move the camera to the exterior scene inside the airship's cargo bay. So basically, we have to set up two scenes for every perspective and transition between them, and we actually have a third and fourth scene for the midground with the clouds and towers and the entire background. If you are interested in my general process, check out this video. In future videos, we will look at how to do these animated light effects, as it was the second most requested technique, and I am planning to do a video on basic workarounds to rigging in Procreate Dreams and its limitations. And I would like to do an advanced bone rig and animation for this little creature, but this time using ToonSquid, as its version 2.0 just rolled out, and it's excitingly powerful regarding bones, rigging, and 2D meshes. So please subscribe and stay tuned for more. Thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions for future tutorial content, let me know in the comments.